Live from London, it's City News International.
City Weltnachrichten.
City Zena Internationales.
City Noticias Internacionales.
This is City News International.
Good afternoon and welcome to City News. My name is Ellie Cook.
And I'm Lauren Taverner. Our main headlines today. The first jurors have been picked for the high-profile trial over the May 2020 killing of George Floyd.
Libyan lawmakers have confirmed an interim unit government headed by Prime Minister Abdulhamid Dbeibah.
The United States House of Representatives is due to vote on a $1.9 trillion coronavirus recovery package.
This is
City News.
And
now we'll look at these stories in more detail.
The first 3 jurors have been selected in the trial of former Minneapolis police officer Derek Chauvin over the killing of George Floyd, an unarmed black man. Mr. Chauvin is accused of second-degree unintentional murder and manslaughter in the death of Mr. Floyd on the 25th of May last year. On Tuesday, 2 men and 1 woman were selected for the 12-member jury. The jurors were chosen after being asked about Black Lives Matter and the damning video at the centre of the case. Several potential jurors have already been dismissed after questioning due to concerns over their impartiality and language skills. Potential jurors must show that they can set aside their opinions and view evidence fairly. Up to 3 weeks have been allocated for jury selection. Opening arguments are not due before the 29th of March, and the presentation of evidence is expected to take between 2 and 4 weeks.
Libya's parliament has voted to approve an interim unit government to lead the country until elections, which are scheduled to be held in December. After 2 days of debate, 121 of the 131 present lawmakers voted in support of cabinet of Prime Minister Abdulhamid Dbeibah. Dbeibah, a powerful businessman from the western coastal city of Misrata, was chosen last month in UN-backed talks in Geneva. This comes after Dbeibah presented his proposed cabinet last week to Speaker Aguila Saleh. Many Libyans are hopeful this will bring peace and stability to the war-torn country, describing this as a historic moment. Others are also critical of Dbeibah's extensive 35-member cabinet, with some accusations of corruption. Libya has been divided between 2 governments since NATO-backed troops ousted and killed the country's ruler, Muammar Gaddafi, in 2011. Turkey, Russia, France and Italy welcomed the UN's appointment last month, but these same countries have allegedly given military support to Libya's rival governments.
The United States House of Representatives is set to vote on a $1.9 trillion economic stimulus package. It is expected to pass through the Democrat-controlled House and will then go to President Biden to sign into law. 96% of Americans will receive direct checks of $1,400 per person, and provisions for the unemployed will be extended to September. The package also allocates funding to reopen schools, for vaccination and testing programs, and to state and local governments. We're now joined by our Washington correspondent, Lillian Fawcett, who's been following the story today. So Lillian, the $1.9 trillion sum seems like a lot, but why is this being hailed as such a landmark when Donald Trump passed a $2 trillion package last March?
Hi, Ellie. Yeah, well, the main difference is really that a quarter of Donald Trump's $2 trillion package was set aside for big business. President Biden's bill is much more focused on families and those who've been impoverished by the coronavirus crisis. Columbia University have actually projected that it could cut child poverty by 45% and up to 50% among African Americans. That's mostly done through a massive increase in child tax credits. The bill means the maximum amount most families receive will go up by 80%. And these measures really bring the US more in line with the kind of social safety net that most Western European countries already enjoy.
So how does the bill compare to the stimulus packages of other countries?
Well, US stimulus does still lag behind as a proportion of its economy. Comparing it with, say, Japan, they've spent 2/3 of the country's economic output on coronavirus stimulus, and the US has only spent a quarter. $1.9 trillion, though, is still a lot of money.
Leading on from that last point, what's the reaction been from Republicans?
Well, despite widespread public support from both Democrat and Republican voters, all but one of the 50 Democrat senators voted against the bill last weekend. The Republicans have said that the bill is just too expensive and it's actually unnecessary as the economy starts to open up following the vaccine rollout.
Thank you, Lillian. Speaking of that vaccine rollout that Lillian just mentioned, staying on COVID, Parliament's spending watchdog has concluded that there is no evidence to show that the government's £22 billion test and trace programme to combat COVID-19 in England contributed to a reduction in coronavirus infection levels. They are now challenging ministers to justify the investment of taxpayers' money. Ministers had justified the vast expenditure on preventing a second national lockdown, but questioning the programme's effectiveness, MPs who compiled the report noticed that we are now in the midst of the country's third lockdown.
As pupils are heading back to school across England this week, many questions are being raised regarding how children will catch up on lost learning. The Education Secretary's latest proposals have sparked scepticism among teachers. Jorge Hinojosa reports.
After a year of online teaching, English pupils are heading back to school this week. But with so much time away from school, how are students going to catch up on lost learning? The Educational Secretary is considering making longer school days and shorter summer holidays. But the proposal have attracted criticism from teachers. Secondary school teacher and counsellor Stephen Longden disagrees with this measure.
I think young people, by and large, have had a terrible experience over the last 12 months. And what they need is not more pressure and not more anxiety. They need a proper summer holiday where they can use that time, hopefully in good weather, outdoors, with their friends, which they've not seen and not spent much time with over the last 12 months, and their family, and getting back to having normal relationships with human beings.
The UK's charity Young Minds reported at the start of the pandemic that 83% of students surveyed have seen their mental health affected. And as the charity shows, mental health is linked with academic success. Stephen Longden believes that if young students do not have adequate mental well-being, they won't catch up with lost learning.
My main priority is the well-being of young people. Make sure they're on track, make sure they have the summer to make sure their mental health and well-being is where it should be. And then we come back and then we look at tailoring the GCSEs in particular around the young people in terms of the amount of content. I genuinely think most children will be able to catch up in the natural course of time.
The Education Secretary is expected to lay out his plan to support teachers and pupils in the coming month. Jorge Hinojosa, City News International.
As some mums are freeing themselves from the responsibility of childcare as students return to school, others are embarking on the new challenge of parenthood. During the first lockdown, over 153,000 live births occurred across the UK. With Mother's Day just around the corner, Olivia Brion investigates how new mums are feeling and how those who have been delivering these babies have been dealing with the changes to their workplace.
In October, new parents Emily and Patrick welcomed their baby boy Huey into the world. What is typically a nerve-wracking time for most people was made worse by the uncertainties of the pandemic.
At the start, I was probably quite anxious. I found out I was pregnant just before kind of lockdown struck, which meant some of my midwife appointments were over the phone, which of course wasn't ideal, especially being my first baby. I wanted to meet the midwives and just check in and make sure everything was okay. The other issue was obviously going to the hospital appointments. Patrick wasn't allowed in, so I was going in there completely on my own.
Though Emily has found that the current situation puts less pressure on her to see everyone with baby Huey, she has missed out on the in-person support groups.
In terms of groups, yeah, I joined one virtually. Obviously, it's not quite the same. I'd rather be meeting mums in person because just for the social aspect of things, and also for Huey to interact with other babies. He hasn't really done any of that yet. I mean, luckily, being so small, he won't remember, but it's now the age he's at 5 months. he needs to be interacting with other children because he's just going to be wondering what on earth is going on in a year's time.
The new challenges that surround pregnancy and childbirth aren't just felt by expecting mothers and fathers, but by the professionals too. Midwife at University College London Hospitals, Deborah Kroll explains.
I think the hard thing for a lot of women in London especially is a very large number of them don't have family in the country. It's so dependent on which country was open, which country was allowed to come in, who could fly out, who could fly in, that most of them delivered without immediate family, came home with no immediate family. What was interesting was the thing that really saved us was that because we had all the midwives working at home became a remote team. And what we said to them was, it doesn't matter what time you send a message, somebody will always answer you. And they used to tell us that made all the difference, because even when they felt they couldn't hear, they couldn't see us and that at least they knew somebody was listening.
Despite the different experience Emily has had of motherhood so far, she is hoping for a more normal Mother's Day.
I am looking forward to obviously my first Mother's Day with Huey. It should be a special day. And yeah, many more to come.
We now have our COVID-19 expert, Jack Grogan-Fenn, to give us the latest on the situation developing in Brazil, where just today the death toll has surpassed that of the US, having almost 2,000 deaths in a 24-hour period.
Yes, so there is increasing concern that Brazil's healthcare system might be on the verge of collapse in several major cities due to the pressure of COVID-19, and Brazil's death toll has just today passed that of the US. Over 80% of intensive care beds in the capitals of 25 of the 27 states in Brazil are currently full, with this new highly contagious COVID variant driving the death toll to over 266,000 in the country. There have been 1,954 deaths in the past 24 hours alone, and that number has been increasing every day for the last 11 days. In fact, a national broadcast company called Global has reported that in Sao Paulo there were 30 deaths from hospitals being unable to fit in any more people, and the government there are looking to implement new stricter measures.
So what has been the response of the Brazilian government to this news?
Despite the high death toll and over 11 million cases of COVID being recorded since the start of the pandemic, President Jair Bolsonaro has told Brazilians to stop whining about the virus as a controversial politician continues to resist quarantine measures and ignore expert advice.
And recently there have been reported cases of the Brazilian variant reaching the UK. What's the latest on that?
Recently, there's also been concern that the variant has reached the UK, who have been successful in their vaccine rollout so far. Some health bodies have suggested that vaccines currently in place are likely to work against the new strain, but with only 7 cases recorded in the UK so far, it's too early to say.
And we're also hearing that there might be an issue with the new Johnson & Johnson vaccine. Can you tell us more about that?
Yes, so the Johnson & Johnsons are facing delays in their COVID-19 vaccine production. This is happening 24 hours before its approval by the European Union, which is certainly a concern. This means that 55 million doses that they have agreed to supply to Europe for the rest of the year will be affected. The company have told the EU that they are having problems with ingredients and equipment used in the manufacturing process.
Thanks for that, Jack.
Mexican feminist activists keep fighting for women's rights following International Women's Day. In a country with one of the highest rates of femicide in the world, Monday's marches across Mexico are seen as a catalyst for feminist activists. Yesterday, the group Las Brujas del Mar called on all Mexican women to stop all sorts of activities.
The lyrics of the song have become a central demand for feminists in Mexico, which is to recognize all femicides. 940 femicides took place last year, according to the Mexican government's official data. Feminist associations say over 2,700 femicides took place. Monday's protest on International Women's Day was followed by yesterday's complete silence. Brujas del Mar and other feminist groups stopped any activities the whole day to make their voices heard. The feminist activist Marisol Calva says remaining inactive for women in Mexico is particularly meaningful.
El hecho de que haya quienes hayan podido en su círculo más cercano hacer notar.
It's the simple fact that some women could make their absence noticeable within their close circle, by which I mean, what would happen if women weren't there? Because, and I believe that not answering the phone or simply being absent or taking care of oneself is a privilege. And to me, when a woman is absent from her family or isn't there, it is exactly the same as when a woman dies.
Es lo mismo, pero en un contexto negativo que ocurre cuando una mujer desaparece.
The Mexican government and Congress have achieved a near equal gender representation under President Andrés Manuel López Obrador, but Marisol Calva says it's all pretend.
Un error que creo que ha cometido este gobierno que hoy tenemos es...
In my opinion, a mistake that the current government is making is to criminalize and stigmatize feminist protest. For example, they say these are not ways of doing things because of broken glasses and stuff on fire. Also, they are trying to construct a false narrative in which feminists are the bad people and are all being manipulated.
Estas feministas son las malas, son las que están manipuladas.
Political analyst Malinilla Garcia argues that the only way to prompt change is education reform.
A policy that is missing in Mexico is education. At the education level, we need to enforce parity, and that must be done at all education levels, from preschool to university. On top of that, we need civil education, which is based on teaching human rights, gender equality, and above all, non-discrimination. At the core, we need to expose and reframe deep-held beliefs of women's worth in society.
The next step for Mexican feminists is targeting the political sphere. A number of Mexican politicians have been accused of sexual assault over the last few years. The fight for gender equality is still on. Thibaut Spirlet, City News.
Now for our business news with Elena Giuliano.
Business on City News International.
Thank you, Lauren. The restaurant group, owner of the big food chain Programma, announced that they will raise $175 million as a cushion to pay debts due to the COVID closures. During the lockdown, the company has reduced the number of its branches, losing 1,400 workers. The brand has revealed a 57% plunge in revenues during 2020 and an annual pre-tax loss of $128 million. That's nearly 4 times higher compared with the previous 12 months. The strategy is to use the gain from the cash call to increase the financial cushion, which will be able to cover all the debts. Henry Horby, the group's chief executive, is optimistic that this move will be crucial to the company's recovery in the next month. But now, from UK to international news. Social media platforms are in the constant battle to keep inappropriate content off their platform. But it's not always an easy task. Russian government say today they will slow access of Twitter services since the company has failed to remove content that's related to the drug use, child pornography and suicide. The government urged the social media company to take action immediately, otherwise it might be blocked entirely in the future. Moving on. Last week saw the publication of long-awaited Khalifa Review, setting out a roadmap for the future of fintech in the UK. The review highlights the importance of fintech in a post-pandemic economy, emphasizing the need for skills, innovation and investment to ensure industry growth. But since the UK left the European single market, other cities have risen up to compete for London's fintech crown, as Georgia Zibert reports, and then back to the studio.
Over the last decade, a mix of cultural and regulatory changes allowed London's fintech scene to emerge as a world leader. Fintech is now worth £7 billion of the national economy and employs around 60,000 people in the United Kingdom. Now that London has left the second biggest global market, Paris is also looking to become Europe's biggest fintech hub. Alistair Haynes is the CEO of European trading platform Aquis Exchange, which largely relocated to Paris in 2019.
Monsieur Macron has been smart enough to realise that there's a tremendous opportunity. Going back into the 1980s, there was a battle of where business can be done, and London had all the business for France a few years ago. And then when electronic trading, then it all went back into France. And then over time, it's now come back into the UK. And those battles will continue. And clearly, Monsieur Macron sees this as an opportunity to take that business back. Not only him, but anybody. You know, I think it's the same with Angela Merkel and everybody else. They see this as a tremendous opportunity where London is at a weak point.
Despite the pandemic, French startups raised a record €5.4 billion last year. It was the only country among Europe's 3 largest markets to grow in 2020.
We are at the beginning of a new wave. And this is the place to be, to invest, to work, to invent, to launch your business, to become a startuper.
David Santef is a partner at Global Founders Capital. He invested in Penny Lane, a Paris-based startup on a mission to digitalize accountancy.
France's strength is that we have really good engineers, and entrepreneurship is quite sexy. I think there are a lot of French people who had left the US who are now coming back. We are repatriating talents. Strictly speaking, regarding Brexit, I've not seen any particular effect. What has a huge impact today is all the logistics flows. We see companies that are very affected by that. It can delay the arrival of English startups in fintech, but there are no immediate effects. It is also that the French market is reaching a certain maturity. Many companies have raised a lot of money in France recently.
London still remains ahead, with 3 times more fintechs than Paris. Although the rivals could be neck and neck soon, both are yet to conquer the deep tech sector, with new battlegrounds in artificial intelligence and cryptocurrencies.
From fintech to forecast now, and over to Denise with the weather.
Come rain or shine, we've got you covered.
City News.
It's a wet and windy day in London, with a mild rain starting the early morning that shows no sign of appeasing. There is a yellow warning that will last until Thursday evening due to strong winds accompanied by heavy and blustery showers. At the time being, gusty winds reach 75 miles per hour, picking up further strength through the Atlantic before easing on Thursday afternoon. Blustering conditions will persist during the weekend, with spells of rain and temperature running between 7 and 9 degrees. In the meantime, Paris is not very much better. A little morning rain become breezy with a couple of showers in the afternoon and a considerable cloudiness. Light rainy will continue Thursday and Friday, turning into heavy rainy and gusty winds over the weekend, with temperature swinging between 5 and 10 degrees. Meanwhile, here in Sardinia, the sun is shining in full force today with 18 degrees. This perfect balance should hold up during the weekend, granting the first chance at hitting the beach, thanks to the loosened social restrictions that are out since last week. Back to you, Lauren.
Thanks for that, Denise. And now over to Martina with entertainment.
This is City News Entertainment. Harry and Meghan's interview with Oprah has made headlines for its shocking revelation of racism within the royal family and lack of help concerning the Duchess' mental health. She opened up about being suicidal and struggling with the British media.
Look, I was really ashamed to say it at the time and ashamed to have to admit it to Harry, especially. Because I know how much loss he's suffered. Mm-hmm. But I knew that if I didn't say it, that I would do it. And I just didn't want to be alive anymore.
The palace released a statement in the aftermath of the Oprah's interview, which says, "The issues raised, particularly that of race, are concerning. Whilst some recollection might vary, they are taken very seriously and will be addressed by the family privately." Broadcaster Piers Morgan has left Good Morning Britain after his insensitive comments over Meghan's revelation. He has said that he doesn't believe one word she says and criticizes the timing of the interview, as Prince Philip is still recovering from the hospital. Piers Morgan has always been very vocal about his dislike of the royal couple. During the last episode of the news show, Piers stormed off the set after a heated conversation with fellow TV presenter Alex Beresford.
Has she said anything about you since she cut you off? I don't think she has, but yet you continue to trash her.
OK, I'm done with this.
No.
Sorry, no. Sorry.
Do you know what? That's pathetic.
You can trash me, maybe, not my...
No.
See you later.
I'm being...
Sorry.
This morning, more updates on his departure from the show have been revealed. There have been 40,000 Ofcom complaints against the presenter. Senior exes asked Piers Morgan to apologise on air, but he refused. Another complaint to ITV came from Meghan Markle herself. Good news for all the partygoers from the Netherlands. Dutch government are holding series of test events as the social experiment aims to track people's behavior before the ease of the restrictions on nightlife in the coming months. Pietro Shorowski reports.
Revelers from around the world were waiting for those sounds for months. On Saturday, some of their dreams came true in Amsterdam, where more than 1,000 Dutch music lovers hit the dance floor in the capital's largest music hall, the Ziggo Dome. The Electronic Music Dance Festival turned out to be a big attendance success, and according to Robin Vonken, a music lover and a journalist of Dutch Radio Veronica, the interest in the event exceeded the expectations of the organizers.
It only took 20 minutes to sort the entire event out. As I tried to get some tickets, it was just the feeling of, wow, we're getting to events again, and trying to get tickets for an event that's really popular. And seeing yourself getting into the queue and waiting for, well, I guess it was 15 to 30 minutes, and then suddenly the screen pops up with, well, all tickets are sold already, so bad luck.
The festival was organized as a part of the government's series of experiments to investigate how large groups can gather safely in times of pandemic. Previous events included a business conference, 2 football matches, and a comedy show. Each of them required their attendees to follow different rules. For the Saturday's event, all participants needed to test negative for coronavirus 48 hours in advance and were urged to take another test after 5 days. Inside the hall, they were divided into 6 groups.
It were a couple of experiments at the same time, so people had to be grouped in, well, some of the experiments. So one group, for example, was need to wear a mask. Other groups didn't need to wear the mask during the concert. But most of all, none of these groups needed to practice social distancing at the entire concert.
As for now, it is unknown what will be the event's impact on the coronavirus situation in the Netherlands. However, more and more people believe that those events are crucial in order to return to the normal life.
1 year of lockdown and 1 year of cancellation of every concert, every event, every congress, every festival, it's one economic disaster for all of them. So just for the economic reasons, I believe we have to and we must test out the possibilities to make it a safe place to host events.
The rest of the world hopes that the Dutch will succeed. For City News, Piotrek Przyborowski.
Voting on nominees for the 2021 Oscars finishes tonight. Following a challenging year for the film industry, Thomas Cole looks at who might be the big winners this year, and how this April's award may be different from any that have come before it.
The Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
And the Oscar goes to...
That was the sentence everyone in the film industry wishes to hear their name at the end of. The Oscar winners would normally be known by now. Due to COVID-19, this year's ceremony has been delayed to the 25th of April. Nevertheless, there are still awards to be won. Nate Jones, a film critic at the magazine Vulture, gives his assessment on who the frontrunners are.
I would say in picture, it's right now considered a two-way race between Nomadland, which is Chloe Zhao's travelogue. It's about Frances McDormand kind of traveling the road as this nomad after the recession of 10 years ago.
My mom says that you're homeless. Is that true?
No, I'm not homeless. I'm just houseless. Not the same thing, right?
The other big contender is Trial of the Chicago 7, which is an Aaron Sorkin movie about the Chicago 7, who were protesters protesting the 1968 Democratic Convention.
We want to underscore again that we're coming to Chicago peacefully, but whether we're given permits or not, we're coming.
We're going to Chicago to protest the Vietnam War.
Favourites in other major categories include Chadwick Boseman for Best Actor and Daniel Kaluuya for Best Supporting Actor, while both Best Actress and Supporting Actress are seen as fairly open races. With excitement building as we enter Oscar season, Mara Webster, a New York-based film industry expert, is intrigued to see what lies in wait.
We have seen over the years that there are certain times where there's maybe a surprise nominee, but you realise that
they've been out on the circuit, they've been meeting people, they've been talking to people, and that maybe played a little bit of a hand in it. And then I feel like with it all moving to April, I'm just curious to see the impact of the fact that this is the longest award season that we've all ever lived through.
And despite COVID-19 having pushed the Oscar ceremony back, Los Angeles-based film critic Scott Mantz is keen to underline that this year will still be a good one for film.
2020 was a great year for movies, as good as any other year for movies. This whole idea that people are saying it should be an Oscar ceremony with an asterisk next to it because it wasn't a true year for film, I think that's wrong. The quality of the films in 2020 were just as good as 2019, 2018, and so on.
With nomination voting closing this evening, we are one step closer to this year's Oscar ceremony taking place. This is Thomas Cole reporting for City News.
Thank you, Martina. And breaking news now. The Met police officer arrested in connection with Sarah Everard's disappearance in Clapham, London, was arrested on suspicion of kidnap, but has now been arrested on suspicion of murder. And that's all from us in the studio. Thanks, Lauren.
And thank you, Ellie. Join us at the same time next week. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
News local to you. This is City.